On August 29, 2016, an Australian family set off on what would become one of the most bizarre and widely reported missing person stories of recent years. The family, parents Mark and Jackie Trump and their 3 adult children, ages 22, 25, and 29, abruptly abandoned their homestead and embarked on a long, aimless road trip, convinced they were being followed, threatened, and in imminent danger. And before leaving, the Trumps took the extraordinary step of leaving behind their passports, credit cards, and cell phones, items most people would consider essential. When they discovered their son Mitchell had secretly brought along his phone, Mark and Jackie demanded he threw it out, convinced it was a tracking device used by unknown pursuers. Over the next 6 days, the family's journey and unraveling would become increasingly strange and fragmented. In the early hours of the first morning, just after traveling all night, Mitchell walked away from the group around 7 a.m. He told authorities later that he could no longer subscribe to what he believed were his parents' escalating paranoid beliefs. Later that same day, 2 of the Trump daughters, Rihanna and Ella, also left the family. They stole a vehicle and drove themselves to the town of Goulburn, where they reported their parents missing. The sisters then took separate paths. Ella returned home to care for her horses, and Mitchell showed up shortly afterward, confirming that he too had disengaged from their family's journey. But Rihanna's whereabouts remained unknown for hours. When she was eventually found, it was in the back of a stranger's vehicle, disoriented and in a catatonic state. She couldn't explain where she was or how she got there. Meanwhile, Mark and Jackie were ultimately located, but in radically different states and separate locations. Jackie was found roughly 217 miles from where the family had last been seen, wandering with no clear sense of direction or explanation for how she had traveled such a long distance. Mark was also located. He was confused and delusional. Both parents were taken into psychiatric care. The surreal saga unfolded live in front of the public eye. Mitchell and Ella were interviewed on national television, attempting to recount their experience, and in Ella's words, shed light on why her father may not want to be found.
Can you shine any light on or perhaps explain why he may not want to be found?
Because he's scared that people are after him. He's not in a good state of mind.
And start off on this trip, I think it's just quite a confusing story.
It is very confusing. I still feel confused. I think our state of minds wasn't in the best place.
It's hard to explain.
There's no bizarre, one reason for it. It's, bizarre. Yeah.
Their testimony was sincere, but muddled, reflecting a family deeply fractured by fear and confusion. After the entire family was located on the 6th day of searching, it became clear that no external threat had ever existed. Police investigations found no evidence of drugs, no history of mental illness, and no credible threat to the family prior to their disappearance. Investigators were unable to determine why the Trumps fled their home or what caused the collective paranoia that propelled this journey. No conclusive explanation has ever been confirmed. The Trump family's strange odyssey remains perplexing, a rare case in which an entire family retreated from their lives without concrete cause, leaving more questions than answers behind. On the evening of February 9th, 2004, a single car crash on a dark rural highway in New Hampshire set off one of the most debated missing person cases in American history. 21-year-old Mara Murray, a nursing student, packed up her dorm room earlier that day. She emailed professors claiming there had been a death in the family and that she would be away for a week. Investigators later confirmed no such death had occurred. She withdrew nearly all the money from her bank account, purchased alcohol, and drove north. Shortly after 7 p.m., her black Saturn slid off Route 112 in Haverhill in New Hampshire. A local school bus driver stopped and spoke with her. She reportedly declined help and asked that police not be called. By the time authorities arrived, minutes later, Mara was gone. Her car was locked, and inside were personal belongings, alcohol, and signs of minor impact from the crash. There were no footprints leading clearly into the woods, despite fresh snow. No confirmed sightings of her have ever been verified after that night. Some investigators believe Mara may have chosen to leave voluntarily, possibly overwhelmed by personal stress, including a recent car accident and academic pressures. Her family rejects that theory, insisting she would never have abandoned them without contact. The case took a strange turn years later when a YouTube account called 112 Dirtbag posted unsettling videos timed around the anniversary of her disappearance. The username referenced Route 112, and a phrase Mara's father once used publicly to describe a possible perpetrator. The videos featured a man laughing into the camera and displaying cryptic imagery, including a ski pass from a nearby mountain dated days after Mara vanished. Authorities investigated the uploads, but found no evidence connecting them directly to her disappearance. The channel was removed. No charges were filed. More than 2 decades later, Mara Murray still remains missing. Whether she walked into the woods and succumbed to the elements, accepted a ride from the wrong person, or intentionally vanished remains unknown. And while the crash scene was small, her disappearance was absolute. Beyond the crash scene, investigators spent years examining Mara's digital footprint. In 2004, cell phone technology was far less advanced. Triangulation data was limited. Her final phone activity did not yield a precise location, leaving investigators dependent on physical search methods in dense woodland terrain. Search radius modeling became central to the case. Authorities calculated how far she could have traveled on foot before succumbing to exposure. The results varied dramatically depending on terrain resistance, snow depth, and adrenaline response after the crash. Some simulations suggested she could have traveled much further than initially assumed. Another rarely discussed aspect is the possibility of delayed discovery. If she entered private property, an abandoned structure, or a concealed depression in the forest, New Hampshire's freeze-thaw cycles significantly alter ground composition annually, complicating the recovery efforts. Investigators also evaluated passing traffic patterns that night. Route 112 is remote, but not isolated. Vehicles travel it frequently. The window between the bus driver's call and the police arrival was small, but not non-existent. That small window remains the pivot point in the entire case. The FBI later joined aspects of the case analysis, though it remained primarily state-led. Multiple ground searches have taken place, as recent as the 2020s, including renewed excavation efforts based on new cadaver dog alerts. However, none produced conclusive evidence. What makes Mara Murray's case endure is not just the mystery, its statistical anomaly. In similar cold weather disappearances, remains are eventually found. In this case, nothing verifiable has surfaced. No clothing, no bones, no confirmed personal items. In missing person investigations, total absence is rare, and that absence is what keeps this case suspended in uncertainty. On December 13, 2009, 38-year-old Stephen Kosher vanished in a mystery that remains unsolved and deeply unsettling. Stephen was described by friends and family as a clean-cut, well-respected, church-going man with no history of substance abuse or risky behavior. On that winter day, he left his home in Utah and drove to Henderson, Nevada, more than 300 miles away. A trip that would mark the beginning of a mystery that has never been solved. What makes Stephen's disappearance especially puzzling is the state in which his car was found. His vehicle was discovered parked neatly at a dead-end cul-de-sac, with no damage and no signs of struggle. Inside were many of his personal belongings, including Christmas presents he had recently bought, blankets and pillows. But several items were conspicuously missing: his cell phone, wallet, passport, and driver's license. Surveillance footage captured Stephen arriving in his car, parking it, and then calmly walking away on foot, as if he had reached a predetermined destination and was continuing on. In the 2 days following his disappearance, a mobile phone signal believed to belong to Stephen was picked up by a cell tower located miles away from his car. It is unknown whether these signals were generated by Stephen himself or someone else using his phone, and if so, why was it being used in that remote location? Family members believe Stephen left Utah with no clear destination or purpose, and investigators have found no convincing motive explaining why he traveled so far from home with no preparation, especially without his identification or means of communication. Some speculation has suggested that Stephen may have traveled to Nevada in search of work, or to advertise for his window washing business, but there is no evidence to support these theories. Authorities ruled out substance abuse or suicide, and to this day, despite extensive search efforts and numerous tips, no confirmed trace of Stephen Kosher has ever been found, and no clear explanation has emerged to account for his sudden disappearance. It was July 16, 2016, and she was waiting for the news regarding her university admissions, hoping to take the next step in her life. Like many young people, she had plans, dreams, and a sense of independence. But that night would become the beginning of a chilling and unexplained mystery. That evening, Ivana attended a party at the apartment of one of her mutual friends, enjoying the company of peers and celebrating the freedom of youth. As the night wore on, she moved on to a local club with 3 friends. The club, filled with music, laughter, and crowded rooms, seemed to be like the perfect backdrop for a night out. But an argument erupted, the details of which remain unclear to this day. Ivana left in haste, barefoot, clutching her high heels in her hands, and began walking. It was around 3:45 a.m. when she was captured on CCTV, moving with purpose, yet visibly disoriented. Her phone battery was low, she had no money, and she faced a long journey of almost 4 miles to reach the safety of her home. During this trek, she sent several texts, including one to her friend expressing frustration. By 4:12 a.m., she was again captured on surveillance footage, still walking along the seaside boulevard. It was the final glimpse of her known to the public. Behind her, at a distance, a man in a plaid shirt with a towel over his shoulder can be seen. This unknown figure has never been identified, and no explanation has been found for his presence or his potential involvement in her disappearance. The initial investigation was slow and disjointed. Searches were limited, and key opportunities to gather evidence were missed in the critical hours. Around 100 people were questioned in the early stages, yet no leads produced meaningful results. Speculation about what had happened has ranged widely. Potentially targeted by the mysterious man seen on CCTV. Others suggest that given her state of disorientation and intoxication, she could have had an accident along the way. Yet nothing concrete has emerged. Every piece of her journey, from the club to the promenade, is shrouded in uncertainty. Despite repeated appeals to the public, no one has come forward with information identifying the man from the surveillance footage. Her disappearance remains a chilling reminder of the vulnerability of young adults navigating the night, the hidden dangers of seemingly ordinary surroundings, and the haunting of uncertainty that follows when a life simply vanishes. Her family and friends continue to search for answers, clinging to the hope that she might still be found alive. Yet more than 4 years later, the mystery endures. A story of a young woman's final night, captured in fleeting surveillance images, leaving only questions, fear, and an unsettling silence in its wake. On February 13, 2017, 13-year-old Abigail Williams and 14-year-old Liberty German were dropped off near the Monon High Bridge Trail for an afternoon hike. At 2:07 p.m., Liberty posted a photo of Abigail walking across the abandoned railroad bridge to Snapchat. It would be one of the last images taken of her alive. At some point on the bridge, Liberty activated the video recording function on her phone. The brief clip, later released by investigators, shows a man walking towards the girls. The individual is wearing jeans, a dark jacket, and a cap. Audio captured from the same recording includes a male voice saying, "Guys, down the hill."
Down the hill. Down the hill. Down the hill. Down the hill.
The girls failed to meet their ride at 3:15 p.m. A search began that evening. On February 14, 2017, their bodies were discovered on private property less than a mile from the bridge. Authorities have not publicly released the specific cause of death, though they confirmed the case was a double homicide. Over the years, investigators released 2 different composite sketches of a suspect and portions of the audio recording. The man captured on Liberty's phone became known nationally as the Bridge Guy. The investigation generated more than 20,000 tips. For nearly 5 years, the case remained unsolved, with limited public updates. In October 2022, police arrested Richard Allen, a resident who lived approximately 2 miles from the bridge. He was charged with 2 counts of murder. Court documents allege that Allen admitted to being on the bridge that day, and that the firearm he owned was forensically linked to an unspent cartridge found near the crime scene. Allen has pleaded not guilty. Legal proceedings are ongoing as of 2026. Because the case is active with the court system, certain evidence still remains sealed. For years, the short audio clip recorded by Liberty German stood as one of the most haunting elements of the investigation. The suspect's voice, captured in real time. The recording, though brief, preserved a moment investigators believe occurred shortly before the girls were let off the bridge. The Delphi murders remain one of the most widely followed criminal cases in Indiana history. The final resolution now rests in the courtroom. In the early hours of July 15, 2016, 17-year-old Lashea Stein disappeared from Aurora, Colorado. It was a warm summer night, and most of the city slept peacefully. Lashea, however, left her home without her mother's knowledge or permission, supposedly to meet an unspecified individual. That would be the last time anyone would ever see her. Surveillance footage captured a solitary figure walking near a bus stop on the 1600 block of North Peoria Street at 2:23 a.m., a figure that friends and family would later recognize as Lashea. Lashea left behind all of her belongings, her wallet, money, phone charger, and even clothes, as though she had simply vanished into the night. According to her mother, this was entirely out of character. Lashea was an ambitious and driven teenager, looking forward to a potential summer job and having recently secured an internship at the University of Colorado Hospital. She had no history of running away, getting into trouble, or associating with people who might pose a danger to her. Her friends describe her as bright and caring, a girl whose dreams were just beginning to take shape. In the weeks and months following her disappearance, Lashea's mother received multiple disturbing reports suggesting that her daughter might have been forced into the dark world of human trafficking. Witnesses claim to have seen a young girl matching Lashea's description in desolate motels known for drugs and prostitution. Some even suggested that her captors were keeping her drugged, controlling her movements, and silencing her from reaching out to the outside world. Police investigations began immediately. Officers canvassed neighborhoods, interviewed friends, and followed up on countless leads. Despite the thorough search, the trail remained frustratingly cold. Over time, the case drew attention from the local and national media, shifting a light on the issue of missing teenagers and the horrors of human trafficking. Yet despite growing awareness, Lashea's whereabouts remain unknown. Theories suggest that Lashea willingly left, perhaps coerced or persuaded by someone she trusted. Others believe she was taken against her will and is being held in conditions designed to erase her identity. Law enforcement continues to explore every possible angle, including tips from the public. To date, no substantial evidence has emerged, and Lashay's fate remains a haunting mystery. Her story is a chilling reminder of how quickly life can change, how a single night can alter everything, and how the unknown can cast a long shadow over those left behind. Lashay's disappearance remains unsolved, and the hope that she might still be found alive persists in the hearts of her family and friends. On April 1st, 2014, Dutch students Chris Kremers, 21, and Lisanne Froon, 22, set out for a daytime hike in Panama. They were staying with the host family while volunteering and studying Spanish. That afternoon, they began walking on a well-known trail, a hiking route which leads up to the scenic viewpoint called the Mirador. They left with a small backpack containing a camera, 2 mobile phones, sunglasses, and a water bottle. They did not take a guide. Photographs recovered later from their Canon camera show the 2 women smiling on the trail in the early afternoon. The final daytime photo, after reaching the scenic viewpoint, suggests they may have continued beyond the marked summit and into more remote terrain, an area not intended for tourists. That same afternoon, they failed to return. Concern grew quickly. On April 2nd, their host family alerted authorities. Searches began, involving local volunteers and police. Search teams trekked steep ravines and riverbeds. No sign of the women were found. Phone records later revealed a troubling timeline. Beginning in late afternoon of April 1st, both women repeatedly attempted to dial emergency numbers, 112 and 911. Over the next several days, dozens of attempts were made. Most calls failed due to lack of signal. One call connected briefly but dropped almost immediately. After April 6th, one phone belonging to Lisanne was turned on intermittently to check for signal, but no emergency calls were made. On April 11th, Chris's iPhone was powered on again, but the correct PIN was never entered. Shortly afterward, both phones went silent, permanently. More than 2 months later, on June 11, 2014, a local woman found a blue backpack along the banks of the river. Inside were the woman's phones, camera, sunglasses, bras, and $83 in cash, dry, but relatively intact. The camera contained over 100 images. The early photos matched the April 1st hike. But then came a second sequence, dozens of nighttime images taken between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. on April 8th. Many were dark, disorienting, shots of jungle foliage, rocks, and what appeared to be a ravine. One image appears to show the back of Chris's head, with what looks like blood near her temple. However, others do dispute that interpretation. One photo in the camera sequence, image 509, had been deleted. Investigators concluded it was removed before the camera was recovered, though whether deletion occurred accidentally or intentionally remains debated. In August 2014, search teams located scattered human remains along the riverbanks near where the backpack was found. A boot containing Lisanne's foot was discovered. Bone fragments were later identified through DNA testing. 28 fragments belonged to Lisanne and 2 to Chris. The remains were dispersed and limited. Dutch forensic investigators concluded that the women likely suffered a tragic accident after becoming lost. The official theory states that they fell or were injured in rugged terrain, leading to prolonged attempts to seek help before succumbing to the exposure or injuries. However, questions remain. Only partial remains were recovered. Some reports indicated that one of Chris's pelvic bones appeared unusually bleached, though investigators attributed decomposition differences to environmental factors. No definitive evidence of third-party involvement was ever established. The case remains officially classified as a tragic accident. Yet the emergency call pattern, the nighttime photographs, and the missing image continue to fuel speculation. More than a decade later, what happened in the dense Panama jungle between April 1st and April 11, 2014 remains unsettling. Not because of proven foul play, but because of the unanswered gaps in a timeline that ends in silence. March 24th, 1994 started like any other day for Matt Flores, a 26-year-old rising star in the military and devoted husband and father. He had recently started a new position at Applied Materials Incorporated in the Silicon Valley, a job that promised stability and growth. Matt was married to Denise, and together they had a newborn daughter, Danielle, a family bound by love and hope for the future. That morning, Matt parked his car in the middle of the company lot, unaware his life was about to end in a flash of violence and confusion. The first sign of something wrong came from a female coworker. She was listening to a talk show on her car radio, and a sudden gunshot rang out. Confused and alarmed, she stepped out of her vehicle to investigate. Within moments, she realized the unthinkable. Matt Flores had been shot in the back of the head at point-blank range. The act was swift, silent, and seemingly invisible to the more than 20 people present in the parking lot. Despite multiple security cameras covering the lot, the killing occurred in a blind spot, leaving investigators with few leads. One crucial piece of footage, however, captured an identified two-door Ford Explorer entering the lot, roughly 20 minutes before the shooting. Seconds later, another vehicle, a two-door Ford Probe, visually similar to Matt's own, appeared in close proximity, seemingly being followed by the Ford Explorer. Minutes passed, and the Explorer left the lot, only to re-enter 3 minutes before the fatal shot was fired. At 8:12 a.m., the sequence of events culminated in Matt's death, a murder executed with precision, in a space nearly invisible to the cameras that might have otherwise captured the crime. Police initially considered the possibility of mistaken identity. Perhaps the shooter intended to target the other vehicle, mistaking Matt for someone else. Other theories ranged widely: a personal vendetta connected to Matt's military service, a grudge against a new employee in a competitive work environment, or even a link to a previous case involving Sergeant Nicholas Cage, a man who had served under Matt in the military, mysteriously disappearing in April 1993 and later found dead under suspicious circumstances. To this day, no evidence conclusively supports any of these theories. The vehicle seen on surveillance, a two-door Ford Explorer with distinctive black trim, manufactured between 1991 and 1994, remains the single most important lead in the investigation. A $100,000 reward is being offered for any information leading to the identity of the driver or any other details about the motive behind Matt Flores' execution-style murder. Friends and family are left with questions that may never be answered. Why him? Why in the middle of a bustling parking lot? Matt Flores, a man described as dedicated, disciplined, and without known enemies, met an abrupt end. The tragedy serves as a chilling reminder of how fragile life can be, how quickly ordinary routines can be shattered, and how a single unknown presence can alter the course of multiple lives forever. To this day, Matt's murder remains unsolved, a haunting mystery etched into the memories of those who knew him, and an open wound to a community that continues to search for answers.